Your Excellencies, Honorable Prime Cabinet Secretary and Secretary of Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellencies, the permanent representatives of member states of the African Union, the leadership of the African Union Commission, which is here, friends of the African Union, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Mes amis, bonsoir. Hamjambo. I am very delighted to see such a big audience here in Addis this evening. And I'm so happy to have been introduced by two very prominent African ladies here. It shows the women power of Africa. Allow me to begin by thanking all of you for making time out of your very busy schedules to come and listen to me and my vision for this great institution, the African Union Commission. I do not take your presence here for granted. I know that you have other things that you have prepared to do today, but you chose to come and be with us here. I know some of you may know me as a politician, but allow me to introduce myself to you today. My name, as has been said, is Raila Amolo Odinga. I'm an African by way of Kenya, although my ancestors came from a place called Bar El Ghazal in southern Sudan. I am a mechanical engineer by training, a businessman, a former prime minister, a grandfather of 5, a father of 4, a husband of 1, that I know of, and a lifelong servant of Africa, but you may call me also Baba. Many of you have heard of me because of politics, which, as you know, can be a challenging arena full of ups and downs. And throughout my career, I have faced obstacles, but I remain steadfast and uncompromising in my belief about African unity. I was born into the spirit of Pan-Africanism as the son of a pioneering leader, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. And under his tutelage and guidance, I was exposed to the rich tapestry of Africa's history through the lens of exceptional leaders. I have witnessed both the continent's greatest aspirations and its most challenging trials. I have experienced the vision and dedication of the founding fathers like Nnamdi Azikiwe, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Ahmed Sékou Touré, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Ahmed Ben Bella, and recently, Madiba, Nelson Mandela. I have also lived through the collapse of that grand vision and have had occasion to watch as the world rapidly transformed, while back at home, we are developing at a slower rate. Thankfully, the vision of the modern AU as we know it, it was brought back to life by Presidents Thabo Mbeki, Olusegun Obasanjo, Abdoulaye Wade, and Abdulaziz Bouteflika. We thank them for their contributions. Indeed, Africa has given all of us the tools to succeed which is why I'm determined to give back to Africa. And we're meeting here today in Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa is not the head seat of AU by accident. This is the cradle of mankind. By contemporary knowledge of science, the oldest species of humanoid lived around this region here, from Ethiopia down to Kenya. So here, you are back home. And they say that if Adam was the first human being, he was an African. He lived here. This is also the oldest country in terms of governance in the continent. It was the only country that was not colonized. So what you see here is not a relic of any kind of colonization. Apart from a brief invasion by Italians, this country has always ruled itself. And when they came here, they found an institution that was much older and stronger than that they left back home where they came from. So you must be proud that Africa actually is the mother of civilization. When Africans were struggling, Ethiopia offered support for liberation of Africa. And the liberation movement moved, and eventually colonialism was defeated. So there were centers: Accra, Cairo, Addis Ababa, Dar es Salaam. Those were the origins of African Organization of African Union. 2.5 weeks ago, we were here in Addis Ababa to come at the launch of the refurbished African Hall, where the Organization of African Unity was founded in May 1963. At that time, I came under a different category. I was invited as a descendant of my father, who was one of the founding fathers of the Organization of African Union. At that time, a big part of Africa had already been liberated. They were represented by presidents. But there was part of Africa which was not free, Kenya being one of them. Kenya, Zimbabwe, Zambia, then Rhodesia, Mozambique, Swaziland, now Eswatini, South Africa, Basuto land then, now Lesotho, Bechuana land then, now Botswana, West Africa, now Namibia, Equatorial Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe, and Cape Verde. So, in that congregation of the African leaders, presidents, the two people who spoke on behalf of the liberation movements, and that was Nelson Mandela and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So now we were invited as the descendants of the founding fathers to witness the opening of that hall. That is why I was here last time. Now, my extensive travels across the length and breadth of Africa have exposed me to the enormous riches and unexploited opportunities in our great continent. I have also had the opportunity to serve the African Union High Representative for Infrastructure Development in Africa between 2018 and 2023, for which I remain profoundly grateful. But I've also represented the AU in other capacity. When Ivory Coast was in turmoil, the then chair of the AU, Mr. Jean Ping, approached me and asked me to be the African Union representative to mediate in the crisis in Ivory Coast. I have also been involved in other peace initiatives in Burundi under Maldimu Julius Nyerere to negotiate peace in Burundi. I was also involved in Mozambique when there was a crisis, when the opposition had refused to accept the results and they needed somebody to go and bring them together. I was involved in the negotiations in Mozambique. So I understand Africa from other perspectives. But I was asked by the current chair to be the high representative of Africa on the field of infrastructure. And I know most of the representatives here from that perspective. This position gave me the opportunity to further appreciate Africa's myriad infrastructural and associated challenges. Here, we were dealing with several infrastructure across the continent. We're dealing with trans-African highways, because Africa has got a elaborate program, PIDA, Program for Infrastructure Development in Africa, with presidential champions for all these infrastructure projects. But there are several challenges that are being faced. That position gave me the inside story of what needs to be sorted out in the African Union. We were dealing with trans-African highways, the Cape to Cairo, the Tunis to the Cape, the Dakar through Bamako, Khartoum to Djibouti, the Dakar to Lagos, Lagos to Mombasa. Then you have the trans-African high-speed railway networks from Beira in Mozambique through Zambia, DRC to Lobito in Angola, and then down to Walvis Bay in Namibia. Then you have the trans-African high-speed railway, again from Lagos through the western coast, all the way to Cairo. Then you have the LAPSET, the Lamu Port, South Sudan and Ethiopia corridor, which we later on revised to move the railway line from the port of Lamu in Kenya through South Sudan, the Central African Republic, Cameroon port of Kribi, to create a land bridge that links the Atlantic and Indian Ocean and opening up the interior of the continent to transport and trade. These were major challenges. Then we are dealing also with energy. Africa is the richest continent in as far as green energy potential is concerned. The green energy, the solar, the sun is here from January to December. Then you've got geothermal potential in the Rift Valley. Then you've got wind potential around the continent. You've got the huge hydro potentials in the continent. These are the areas. In the Inga Dam in Congo, you can generate over 100 gigawatts of power. And then you can use that to supply energy across the continent and lower the cost of energy in the continent. You have got the Southern African Power Pool, you've got the Eastern African Power Pool, the Central African Power Pool, the West African Power Pool, and the North. And you can interconnect these power pools and bring down the cost of energy to what is acceptable universally. In some places in the continent, like if you go to the Gambia, the cost of electricity is 38 US cents per unit. What can you do with that? In some places, it is 4 US cents per unit. If you want to be able to process the raw materials that are available in abundance on the continent, you must address the issue of energy acceptability in our continent. And that was one of the issues we dealt with. The issue of high-speed connectivity, fiber optics, was another one, to connect all the African capitals so that communication can become much easier and faster, and give our people access to the internet. Then the open skies was another issue. Open skies to bring down the cost of air transport on the continent. Africa is huge, and the infrastructure down on the roads and highways and railways are not yet fully developed. But you've got the skies, which are free. You don't need to construct anything. All you need is just construct airports and buy planes. That's all. But then there are barriers which have been put there. Each and every country has got their own air traffic control. And to fly the airspace, you have to get a permission, and you have to pay. And this makes the air transport so expensive in Africa, where the air transport is mostly needed. The air transport in Africa is much more expensive than it is in Europe. In Europe, they've got one European air traffic control. And once you've been cleared, you can't just fly, you only inform the other countries that I'm overflying, and you have no problem. In Africa, you have to wait days to be given a clearance if you are trying to fly with your own aeroplane. The other time, I was trying to fly from Dar es Salaam to Niamey in Niger for a conference. I was holed up in Dar es Salaam in a hotel for 10 hours because you must get an overflight clearance over Uganda, DRC, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Nigeria, and Niger itself. At that time, I was going for the funeral of the president of Namibia. I'm sitting in Nairobi at the airport for 3 hours to get clearance over Tanzania, DRC, Zambia, Botswana, and Namibia itself. So these are self-imposed restrictions on our continent. This is what we call the low-hanging fruits that you can harvest without a problem. But these are still there as a challenge. These are some of the problems that we were dealing with when I was there. And saying that this means a challenge that we need to deal with going forward. Then, in the continent, we have the youth. The youth is the biggest asset that we have in our continent. African continent is a young continent because 70% of our youth are below the age of 35. This can be either an asset or it can also be a challenge. Because the youth, if they are not empowered, they become a drag on the economy. They become drug addicts. They become criminals. And they become a drag on the economy. But if they're empowered with skills,
I agree. It should be back now.
So, thank you. Thank you. So, our youth are the biggest resource that we have in the continent. But we first need to give the youth the requisite tools that they require to be able to create wealth for our continent. This is another major challenge to us. This is what other countries have done. This is what China did. China empowered the youth and gave them skills so that when they opened up their economy, the big manufacturing companies rushed to China because they saw there highly skilled and cheap manpower and also cheap raw materials. So you go to China, all the major manufacturing companies are in China. The automobile, Mercedes is there, BMW is there, Volkswagen is there, Peugeot is there, Citroën, Volvo, Ford, Toyota, Nissan, Hyundai, all of them are in China. In Germany, they tell me it is cheaper to manufacture a Mercedes-Benz in China and ship it back to Germany than the one manufactured in Stuttgart, Germany. That enabled China to move 600 million people from poverty to middle income status. So China is today no longer the cheapest destination because most of the people have become more affluent. A gap is left down there underneath, which Africa can fill. Because China has the cheap raw materials, but those raw materials are made with original raw materials from Africa. They have cheap industrial materials. They have got steel, they have got copper, they have got aluminum. But all those are made with raw materials coming from Africa. So if you can do the value addition on the continent, then you don't need to, people don't need to go to China. Those industries will come to Africa. And Africa will become the next factory of the world. This is one of the things that I have in mind. This unity has undermined our ability to mobilize our resources, to catalyze the collective dreams of the continent's citizens. Africa's unity is therefore sacred to me. We must return unity to the top of our priorities as Mwalimu Nyerere and Nkrumah did. Without unity in a fast consolidating and changing world, Africa will continue to be marginalized, exploited, and irrelevant. It is why today I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to open your minds to a new Africa. Imagine an Africa that's booming with industry, where businessmen and women from Bamako in Mali can take the transcontinental high-speed rail to trade in Kampala, Uganda, where the cotton material from Lomé in Togo can be bought online by our housewife in Lusaka, where African products can be bought in supermarkets across the world under the name of African brands owned by Africans, and the African workers and farmers are proud of their products. An Africa that does not require visas for other Africans. An African men and women who do not climb on a rickety boat or in an airplane cargo hold, risking their lives to go to greener pastures. I envision a continent whose progress is driven by its own people, that pushes to be a dynamic, influential, and respected force in the international arena. And here, again, the barriers will be placed on ourselves. My friend Aliko Dangote, one of the most prominent African businessmen, tells me, Raila, it's so difficult to do business in Africa. I need 35 visas to travel across the African continent. Yet my French competitor does not need any visa. The French passport can go to all African countries. How then can you compete? How can you benefit by being African? You're being punished because you're an African. These are some of barriers which make us look just stupid. In Europe, when I was living there, traveling in Europe was very difficult. You had to have a visa. When I was traveling from Germany to Britain on a train, I needed a visa to transit through Belgium or Holland, 2 visas. And if you did not have that visa, they put you back on the train back to where you came from. Today, you don't need a visa in Europe. The Schengen visa, you can go to any country in Europe. You only get, if you're traveling by road, you only get to know that you have crossed the border by seeing the different registration numbers. And so Europe has become a village. Why can you not do that in Africa? I intend to see that we introduce Africa, the AU visas, like the Schengen visa. So my leadership at the AU will not be one of the same rhetorics, where people meet a few times a year and return to their enclaves. My leadership will be pegged on the dreams of our forefathers, who expected that by now Africa would roar in one united voice. So here we know every year there's a General Assembly here. The jets come, land, and they move into here. Coming into these premises is not as easy as you came today. Today it was easy because we are coming to meet a candidate. Then those days, there's a lot of security. Then there's a lot of talk in the halls here. Monsieur le Président, this and that, resolutions are passed, and off the jets will leave again Addis Ababa. I can tell you without fear of contradiction that 93% of these resolutions which are passed here are never implemented. That is by confirmation from Mr. Faki himself. So it has become a talking shop. I intend to change that to ensure that all the resolutions which are passed here are properly implemented. So we will not put anything in the agenda and the resolution if we know it cannot be implemented. And if it's not implemented, we'll have a very good reason to explain why it was not implemented. My vision for the youth is to place them at the center stage and driving force behind the innovation and change. Today, African youth are drowning on ships and boats, rickety boats, trying to get to Europe, going to greener pastures. It's a big shame that we're losing young, energetic people because of the poverty on our continent. So the solution is to change this by creating proper employment opportunities on the continent so that they don't have to leave the continent going to look for jobs where they're not wanted. You're ramped there as a refugee, you're taken there as a prisoner. It's a big shame. So these young people will find jobs here. Picture vibrant cities buzzing with energy as young entrepreneurs leverage technology and creativity to build dynamic businesses. With AI and digital resources at their fingertips, they invent solutions for our unique challenges, transforming agriculture with smart farming technologies, revolutionizing healthcare with telemedicine, and reshaping education through accessible online platforms. Our young minds are not just participants in the global economy. They are leaders, innovators, and change makers. My economic transformation plan envisions an economically transformed continent thriving on the richness of its resources and the unity of its people, a continent that not only sustains itself, but is a powerhouse of global trade. The African Continental Free Trade Area will be more than a policy. It will be a reality. Imagine goods flowing seamlessly across the borders, facilitated by advanced logistics and digital platforms, creating jobs, fostering innovation, and ensuring that no Africa goes hungry. My environmental sustainability plan envisions our rich biodiversity. It is protected, and our natural resources are managed wisely. In the face of climate change, we lead the way in renewable energy, harnessing the sun and the wind power to power our homes and industries. Our agricultural practices need to be regenerative, preserving our land for future generations and ensure food security for all. Africa is not the offender in this debate on climate change. Africa is a victim because Africa's emission is less than 5%, about 3%, somewhere there. But Africa suffers the biggest effect in this animal called climate change. Many of African countries today live between two twin disasters: floods and drought, El Nino and his sister La Nina. So floods, when the floods come, they destroy homes. People drown. Our infrastructure is devastated. Bridges are washed, and so on and so forth. And when the drought comes, livestock is dying. People go hungry. There's no food, famine, and so on. So first, we need to make our contribution to this agenda of climate change by greening Africa, rolling back the desert. But we are also the biggest arable land available today on the planet Earth. So we make use of what we have on the continent. But in the negotiations for compensation, if we go as Benin, as Cape Verde, as Egypt, as Senegal, as Kenya, they just look at you. I have been in those COPs. I was in COP 15, I was in COP 16, I was there in Copenhagen, I was in Cancun, Mexico. I've been in a number of those COPs. I was in Sharm el-Sheikh. Now I'm not going to Baku next week. It's Baku, and next year it is in Brazil. But it's a talk show. People talk and they keep on pushing you. They make promises of billions, but when it comes to contributions, nothing is happening. But if Africa negotiated as Africa, it would be a different matter altogether. But if you go as individual countries, we will keep on being pushed left, right, and center. And that's why we must have one agenda on this issue, climate change, and say this is what it is, and these are our terms. Gender equality and inclusion. In this ideal Africa, gender equality is not just an aspiration, it is a reality. Women and girls are empowered, need to be empowered to pursue their dreams, leading in every sector, from technology and politics to education and business. African woman has made a lot of contribution in history. African woman is the breadwinner in most of African societies. She's the one who wakes up so early in the morning, to go to the farm, to go and farm. The one who is looking after the children at home. She's the one who is also fetching water to bring at home. The one who is cooking in the home. And then in the evening again, she's the one who is the workshop. So African woman is a great enemy, a great human being. African women must be given their rightful space. They must be respected and empowered. We must ensure that their voices are heard in every decision-making process, creating a balanced and equitable society. Cultural renaissance. Let's envision a cultural renaissance in Africa. An African that celebrates its rich heritage while embracing modernity. Our art, our music, our literature resonate worldwide, showcasing our talents and telling our stories. Festivals and cultural exchanges thrive, reinforcing our bonds and inspiring future generations to cherish and promote our diverse cultures. Of course, with this ambitious dream, there must be a plan, which is why my campaign and my leadership have come up with an extensive technological innovation plan, utilizing artificial intelligence as its bedrock. In this future, we embrace technology as an enabler of progress. Cities are smart, utilizing AI to optimize everything from energy consumption to transportation systems. Education is accessible to all, with digital classrooms that open doors to knowledge regardless of location. Our health systems are strengthened through telehealth and AI diagnostics, ensuring that every individual receives quality care. But fundamentally, my rallying call is the leadership of Africa, that we join hands and make sure that no African is left offline. Every African should be online. And now let me conclude. A call to action. Today I invite each one of you to imagine this Africa, a continent bursting with potential and brimming with possibilities. As I present my candidacy for the position of chairmanship of the African Union Commission, I'm committed to turning this vision into reality. But I cannot do it alone. It will take all of us, leaders, innovators, and every citizen working collaboratively to dismantle barriers, foster unity, and pursue excellence. Together, let us harness our collective power to create a future where Africa stands tall on the global stage, an emblem of resilience, creativity, and unity. Let us embark on this journey toward a brighter and more prosperous Africa. Africa is the richest continent on the planet Earth in terms of strategic raw materials that have made other parts of the world rich. The paradox is that the richest in terms of resources is also the poorest in terms of living conditions of these people. This is what we need to change so that African people can be rich people. We have been blaming others in the past, but the time for blame game is gone. Now is the time to act as Africans, and we take our destiny in our own hands, and we work collaboratively to uplift the living conditions of African people. There are those people who do not believe that Africa can develop. So they are what we call Afro-pessimists. Afro-pessimists are those who think Africa is a lost cause. But the Afro-pessimists, like myself, are those who believe in the ability of the African people to develop Africa. Africa will not be developed by foreigners coming to Africa. The foreigners will come to invest, not to develop, but to make money. But ultimately, Africa will be developed with the brains and energies of the African people. And that's why you've seen the story I tell of the African lion. That African lion is a very resilient animal. And here the African lion is giving a message to the Asian tiger. And the African lion is, as you know, Africa, the lion is a revered animal. The Cameroonian soccer team is called the Indomitable Lions. The Senegalese soccer team is called the Lions of Teranga. The Moroccan national team is called the Atlas Lions. And in East Africa, we call the lion Simba, mfalme wa msitu. That the lion is the king of the jungle. When it roars, the other animals listen. So the African lion is giving a message to the Asian tiger. That you, the Asian tiger, you have danced alone on the stage for far too long. I was asleep in the jungles of the Congo. But now I'm awake. I'm surrounded by the mighty mountains of Kilimanjaro.